Welcome, eCom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
I don't think brands necessarily need a full platform, front-end storefront all the way through logistics, but I think it's about where do those two meet? And it really comes in at the delivery promise, the inventory availability, and the channel management across all the places those brands sell. And if you can nail that experience, you can really help the brand grow wildly, because the conversion lift you get when you move to 2 days, 3 days, 4 days versus 5 to 9 and the customer's just sitting there wondering is massive. And it's not necessarily that costly for your business.
Welcome, eCom Logistics Nation. This episode, Nod and I welcome Sean Henry, CEO and co-founder of Stored. Having experienced the fragmentation and disconnected technology of the third-party logistics industry firsthand, when both running e-commerce businesses and working in supply chain optimization at an automotive manufacturer in Germany, Sean co-founded Stored in 2015 to make supply chains a competitive advantage for brands of all sizes. Sean attended Georgia Tech prior to founding Stored and has since been recognized as a Teal Fellow, named in the 2019 Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and in 2021 by Forbes as the youngest CEO of $1 billion company. Sean, we are truly excited for the conversation. Thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
I did not know that. I know the young part and the $1 billion part, but I did not know that you were recognized as the youngest CEO of $1 billion valued company.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Coming up on 2 years ago. So I don't know if I've aged out of it or what occurred, but at the time, I was surprised by it too. I was on a speaking event with Forbes up in Detroit, and they said it on stage, and I looked around for a second like, are you sure? I feel like I would know that.
I think you might have just beat out the Kardashian, right? I think, was it Kylie who I think followed shortly after that, but
well, there's a difference between youngest billionaire and youngest CEO of $1 billion company. The big slight distinction. I haven't quite made it there.
Makes sense.
I still do remember, just from a background standpoint, I think it was like 2018-19 timeframe when I first heard the name Stored. So I started doing research and look at LinkedIn, and I'm looking at like Sean, and I'm like, oh, few younglings getting into the industry, right? It's going to be interesting to watch. Lo and behold, that youngling's actually been extremely successful in this space. So congratulations to you for all those achievements.
I appreciate it. I go with the, just because I'm young doesn't mean I'm innovative, but just because I'm young doesn't also mean we're not good operators. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and it's just on us to do the best we can.
Yeah, and for the people that are just listening and not watching this on YouTube, Sean's got probably one of the best backgrounds of all guests that we have had. He's sitting with his background facing an actual live warehouse. I see a forklift. I think it might be a receiving door. Is that your receiving?
That's right. We got an inbound processing area back here. And what better way to talk about warehousing and fulfillment than in front of a warehouse?
I love it. And it's a live, real time. You can see what's happening. So we might give some commentary through the podcast on what's happening, right?
Oh boy, I'm going to get quizzed.
Exceptions.
Yeah, let's hope no one puts a big red cone on anything or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, listen, Sean, you've accomplished a ton in a relatively short period of time. I mean, Stored was founded less than 10 years ago. Would love if you could kind of walk us through what was that pre-Stored journey, and what were those experiences that influenced your decision to launch Stored in the first place?
Yeah, I think I'm a classic tale of when you look in reverse, it's a lot easier to connect the dots together and figure out the trend line than in the moment where you feel confused and new when you're getting into a new category. So what I mean by that is I still have the same eBay account that says member since 2003. I was 7 years old and sold my Christmas presents online. I was very lucky that I was one of the first cohorts of classes through K-12 and online school for a year when my parents were working, but having to move around a lot. And so I was on the computer all the time. And for Christmas, I decided to try to list my Airhogs Aerojet and Game Boy Advance, something like that, and sold it for a few $100 and asked my parents to drive me to UPS, connect their bank account to PayPal. And I don't think they ever trusted me on the internet again. But it's a long story of, I then had multiple small e-commerce businesses through middle school, high school. I was very first focused on electronics and phones, cases, accessories, parts, and then moved over to the same kind of category in the automotive space. The background was, first my parents said, you want a phone? Best of luck, buy it yourself. And then same with a car. And so I just kind of got into the two industries and tried to get to know them. And the best way I could see doing that was buying and selling products that I could arbitrage. Literally growing up buying things off Craigslist, fixing them, selling them on eBay until I could get to the point of buying and importing products from China, normally off Alibaba and other websites. And this is before, hey, everyone drop ship everything was really a massive industry. This is in the probably at that point, 2006 to 2009 range. I was then in high school. I was studying, I was buying automotive parts mostly as the primary business. I was about to go to Georgia Tech, and I had been bugging this company, Hugo, that I had been buying products from for 3+ years, just cold emailing the CEO. I'd love to come work for you guys. I'll do it for free. I want to see how you've built this business. So I got a really unique experience before going to Georgia Tech to work internationally and their lean management division, going factory to factory, trying to figure out how do we improve the process flow on the floor. And then at the end of this program, which was 6 months of going every factory, Germany, France, Mexico, Canada, Enterprise, Alabama, Mableton, Georgia, doing small items. We looked at very large spanning optimization of how do we free up tens of millions of dollars of inventory annually. And that's really where I really stumbled upon the problem that was the underlying challenge to the trend I saw in the industry. So we started looking at how do we free up all of this inventory globally. And we realized at this company, we had over 23 factories across 19 countries. And each one of those factories had a different 3PL running a different WMS system with a different contract structure around how the pricing was modeled, how the term of the contract was modeled. None of it was integrated back into our NetSuite. And so we were going through these annual processes with auditors, trying to figure out our global inventory levels, and then going through consulting projects, trying to figure out the right network and inventory optimization. So I kind of stepped back and said, okay, whether I was the small merchant myself, or I'm at this enterprise where I thought they were going to have a best-in-class supply chain, everybody's dealing with the same challenge of they want a prime-like logistics network. And that's not the, hey, spend anything it costs to get something to a customer in 2 hours, like a lot of people think when they think of prime. It's about having a trusted, reliable, resilient, and most importantly, cost-effective logistics system that gives your brand the right unit economics on your logistics and fulfillment, but also competes and wins at the buy box with the customer. The joke I like to leave people with is, think about when you purchase something from Amazon and they miss that delivery day. You go, must have been my doorstep. I did something wrong. Amazon never gets it wrong. And then you go buy from a mid-market brand and you don't get a post-purchase email confirmation within a minute with the tracking ID and more. And you go, I've been scammed. It's this incredibly imbalanced playing field for these brands. But what I saw at a small company and then at this large company was that the two problems that prevent brands from getting this Amazon-like logistics are, first, how fragmented physical logistics assets are. And then the second is that your software is fundamentally sold separately. So just really quickly double click, the fragmentation that Stored looks at is not just the vertical, hey, look how many trucks are fragmented out there. We need to go roll up all the truck drivers. It's that horizontally, when you move that product end to end across the globe. The first boat you put it on, then the first truck that picks it up, the first warehouse it goes into, the fulfillment center, the last mile driver, the returns, all of those costs dramatically impact the next cost down the line. So how do you build a more end-to-end network that tries to optimize the multimodal movement of inventory? That's the problem Stored focused on. And then secondarily, you go and you partner with these 3PLs, these warehouses, these trucking partners, and all of them have purchased a different off-the-shelf warehouse management system or transportation management system or other. But that's not what you as a brand use to run your consumer experience. You're on a Shopify, a store, BigCommerce, some other storefront, maybe a financial tool like a NetSuite or QuickBooks. And so you're left wondering, do I have to build a custom integration layer to tie together all these WMSs and TMSs? Or do I have to go purchase an order management system, but maybe I'm not ready for that as a brand? And so this is just a very long story of, it's this horizontal fragmentation of moving your products end to end, coupled with software that doesn't span that multimodal movement and optimize across those modes that brands struggle with. And as a result, they struggle to compete and scale at the right economics for their business. So we started Stored just over 8 years ago. The first 2-3 years for us were very bootstrapped. I was a young founder. We were getting our first customers, our first revenue before we raised any dollars. And the last 5 years have been really scaling up that mission of how do we provide what we call cloud supply chain.
That makes a lot of sense, my friend. Yeah, and there is so much to dig into, the things that you said, right? Like that, if we were to simplify this, that prime-like logistics experience, I have been passionate about it. I have a hypothesis around why it works in some cases and it does not in some cases. And I think, first it comes down to the commerce channels, right? Like, so the commerce channels where you are selling have to be capable of being able to manage that. And you've seen the likes of the shop promise from Shopify, which is the prime-like experience kind of replication from a commerce channel standpoint. And eBay tried to do a eBay promise, right? TikTok's now getting into fulfillment themselves. But even today, most of my experience, so I've been going through, some early Black Friday shopping, a whole bunch of electronics. And as I do that, majority of the sites I'm realizing, because I'm buying electronics, most of them, I just bought a new 3D printer. The shipping speed is still 5 to 9 days. Like the variability on that shipping speed, like how do you not know if I'm placing an order right now, when can you deliver this by? Like I really want to know. Now I'm checking my Gmail every other day to see, okay, let me open up that tracking link and see if it's like being delivered. I want it by next weekend as an example. And that experience still kind of sustains in the market. And I feel logistics, and to the point that you're making, is in a better position to offer that service than actually commerce channels just trying to throw a number and push the merchant to do something, right? Like, because how does shop work, right? Like the shop promise today on Shopify, it's like they'll make the promise, but logistics has to figure it out, right? Which is not actually the case with Amazon. If Amazon's making the promise, it's already predetermining the warehouse that it will ship from it before you press the checkout button. Right. And that's where the experience kind of lies. And I agree with you, right? Like from that horizontal perspective, if you can get up there, it makes a lot of sense. What's your opinion? Like, how does that prime-like experience translate? Like, where are the challenges? I have a couple more, but I would love to hear from you. Like, where are the challenges? How do we get to that? How does a brand get to that prime-like experience?
Yeah, well, you had a great point, which is brands today are omnichannel. A large part of the challenge is that they're selling on so many different channels that it's hard for them to coordinate the different required speeds across those channels, integrate to them in an effective way that gives the right delivery speed that brand can actually go meet. And so they end up in this world where maybe they go buy a post-purchase checkout system. I won't name names, but a lot of these delivery promise meets email tracking after systems out there. You hit the nail on the head. They have no tie at all to your physical logistics. Those brands pitch, well, somewhere in the 70 to 80% accuracy of that initial 3 to 5 days that they tell the customer once they put in the zip code. But it has no tie to where your inventory is, what parcel options you have, what your order cutoff time in your facilities are. It's really an optimization curve of, do we think the customer will be mad if we make this promise and they miss it versus happy that they can see it and convert to purchase? And so I think the value in a system like Stored and what we're building is how integrated everything is. A lot of times what we hear about, even just our order management system, which is the core piece of software that our customers interact with, which is where they see their customer data, their order data, their inventory data, they plan their order routing, their order allocation, their parcel selection, is how important it is that it's deeply integrated to the stored WMS that runs the buildings, that gives that low latency, constant syncs between the systems, real-time availability of the data, allowing them to do things even just like modify and cancel the order down to very late in the picking and packing process. Well, that's not always the case. When you're a traditional brand and you're going and partnering with a traditional 3PL, a lot of times you're integrating over EDI, maybe over API, but a lot of times it's batched. It's every 30 minutes, every few hours. And just the amount of leakage and issues that few minutes of processing can cause in a high velocity e-commerce environment is massive. And so I think that what Amazon really nailed is an integrated front end digital experience with the back end logistics and commerce experience. And that's what we're trying to create here at Stored. But I would go so far as to say, I do think there was a large decoupling over the last decade or two from some of the GSI and eBay Enterprise and other days where I don't think brands necessarily need a full platform, front end, storefront, all the way through logistics. But I think it's about where do those two meet? And it really comes in at the delivery promise, the inventory availability, and the channel management across all the places those brands sell. And if you can nail that experience, you can really help the brand grow wildly because the conversion lift you get when you move to 2 days, 3 days, 4 days versus 5 to 9 and the customer's just sitting there wondering is massive. And it's not necessarily that costly for your business. And so all I'd really end on is we very much believe not every brand needs 1 day or 2 day delivery. And we're not here to tell every brand to go get that. We want to figure out that optimization curve of where do your customers, your consumers fall in the price, value, and speed kind of matrix. And maybe 3 days is best for your brand. But even saying 3 days and saying that accurately is so much better for your consumer, your sales, and your economics than just blindly guessing a long period of time and losing the customer.
And the beauty of it, right? There's quite a bit of option. It's not as hard to do anymore. So like I implore brands to at least go out and explore how you could make a promise and then work with even your traditional 3PL. Say, I'm going to give you a managed delivery date and you're going to follow an SLA around that, right? Like I'm going to contractually tie you down to this particular delivery method because it's really important for that merchant experience. And the second part, delays happen. Operational delays can happen even at the last minute when you can actually do a rate shop to say, I can upgrade this and get it there tomorrow. Sometimes you can't get it there tomorrow, right? As an example, have the communication method to be able to inform the client that this is what happened, create transparency so people know instead of waiting that it's going to arrive tomorrow and it does not, right? Like, so I think those are some really key factors that, folks need to take into effect. So thank you, Sean. Really, really good explanation.
And I think you hit a second key point, which is simply the tech stack needed to run this. A lot of these brands don't have the 3PL partner with the sophistication to meet the delivery promise necessarily. A lot of them use a rudimentary coded rules of how to select what parcels in their WMS system. And while sometimes that works, it's oftentimes a very legacy, on-premise, self-built WMS system. It's not always the leading system out there that they've purchased. And so it becomes a challenge of, okay, when you're making different promises to different consumers, does my 3PL even have the capability to go do that rate shopping? And so that's where we've really focused on having that WMS run the buildings, the OMS run the brand and the consumer experience and promise, but that parcel TMS engine sitting really elegantly between the two and being called on by both of them to make decisions that aren't really siloed to one or the other, really span the two and span the whole operation. But a sophisticated parcel TMS, deeply integrated to multiple carriers that you have on that TMS, is such a strong value proposition for a brand, a 3PL, anyone in e-commerce, because that is as much as what coordinates and orchestrates your costs and your speeds as any other component in your supply chain.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. Drop the mic on that. Sean, I want to maybe just pivot to a couple of things you had said in the beginning where, fulfillment is hard. It's high cost. Unit economics are extremely important. And, you tie that all together, logistics has a big challenge, which is revenue. And, it would probably be an injustice if we didn't talk about revenue in the logistics space, 3PL space, because we've seen a lot of volatility in the past, 6 to 12 months with 3PLs or logistics companies either closing shop or being sold off for a fraction of what their high watermark valuations were, in the past, couple of years. And as we say, and many say in the industry, logistics or the 3PL space is traditionally a race to the bottom. There's not a lot of margin there when you're, for companies that are offering 3PL services. So would love to see or hear how you're seeing the market today and what opportunities, what different type of approach are you leaning into or most excited about?
Yeah, I'm going to tread lightly here as I'm friends with a lot of these founders, but a lot of brands have declined revenue year over year. I won't name names, but you've seen some 70+% decline. You've seen some close down, and that's very, very common across the industry right now. And it really just comes back to quality of revenue is kind of point one. And a premise that actually the COO of LinkedIn gave me a few years ago that I just absolutely loved, which is if I can't point to what ROI every dollar of my revenue is getting, what that customer is getting from me that they can't get elsewhere, and how they're getting a return on their investment, then it's fickle revenue. It may go away the second there's a macro issue. It may go away the second somebody else bids on it. And I think that's the basis of what we're seeing right now, which is when Stored started, we were around the time that some of these freight brokers, freight forwarders were raising their Series A's, and we were seeing those as interesting modes. But we really tried to ask ourselves, if we want to build this end-to-end supply chain platform long-term, where do we start? Because you can't do it all from day one. And we determined that all of your supply chain costs felt like they were related to where your inventory is held relative to where it's manufactured and where it's being delivered. And if we could help control the warehouses, you could really influence the trucking, the last mile, and all the other costs over time and have a stickier relationship with the customer than more transactional freight services, which pick up today, drop off tomorrow. And so over time, as we expanded from there to where we are today, I think there's three pillars of differentiation for Stored. The first is that we're mid-market. A lot of companies are either chasing let me do a little bit for the Fortune 500s of the world. And that's a lot of the freight companies or the kind of on-demand storage companies or other. And you can always be a capacity as a service for a large enterprise, but you're going to have a lot of churn. You're going to have these 3, 6, 9 months. It's going to be very volatile. You're going to have a race to the bottom. It's not a fun place to be. And the same actually applies for the SMB space out there. If you're cheaper than fulfillment by Amazon, you can go win a lot of merchants. But it is a volatile segment, often being run by a single person business on a credit card, importing their first inventory. I know, I used to do it. And these aren't necessarily customers who are looking for value and willing to commit long term, and giving the right economics doesn't necessarily suffice because they're such a small brand. So a lot of companies are out there arguing, here's why technology decreased my cost to operate. I can match trucks better than anyone else. Well, they're getting challenged when you are not actually seeing a lower operating cost than C.H. Robinson necessarily in today's market. So when you combine this premise of we are mid-market and these are more stable customers that have real value prop and ROI we can drive in terms of sell more, save money, eliminate headache. We are multimodal, so we're not just tethered to one logistics service.
One of the things that I do want to highlight on that front is, I think the first time when I met Sean, I actually asked the question. I look at your website, I hear your pitch, but what does Stored actually do? Right? Like that was generally a question. And the reason why I kind of bring that up is my observation has been this true startup mindset, right? Like if we leave everything aside, it's pivot or persevere. The model has shifted as the market has demanded the shift. As the revenue models, there is hypothesis, you prove or you unprove, right? And you decide the direction that you want to head. Again, I know those are kind of inside baseball things to the organization, right? But I almost get a feeling that there is that ethos of, hey, this is who we want it to be. Does not make a lot of sense. Let's do a little bit of shift and see and acquire. And I think We'll touch upon the 3PL, 4PL business models as well in a little bit, but that's just one example of like how things evolve to make sense, right? Like as you are financially being prudent to the organization, like we are talking about volatility in the market. And then how do you counteract that? Is by recognizing that I just can't stay the course. Something has to change.
Very well said. And it's one of our core values as a company is learn and iterate, which I think is just that entrepreneurial mindset of we didn't get here because we woke up one day and said, this is what needs to be built. The world needs this. We've made a million micro pivots along the way. Okay, this is what we're hearing from the market. This is what we're hearing from the market. But I think most importantly, we do try to take the premise of don't watch your competitors, watch your customers. Don't just listen to your investors, watch your customers. We very much focus on that customer and kind of what exactly do they need and try to do everything we can to solve that. Because if we didn't, we would never have gotten into all of the physical logistics that we did. It's a lot easier for an investor to say, oh, only do the high margin software stuff. But when we say, if we want to change the paradigm for our customers as much as possible and have the biggest long-term opportunity, we have to really take this integrated software and logistics approach. But you're spot on that we're always willing to learn and adjust. And if I could leave one mark on our team or on Atlanta or on whatever segment we're in, is just hopefully we've created a culture of more entrepreneurial team members who can start up new products, divisions, businesses, and go and scale them. We are 5 or 6 or 7 divisions within a company that have all been startups within the startup. And that's how we talk about them. That's how we think about them. And managing that at hundreds of millions of revenue scale is increasingly complex to think about all the different time and capital and more allocation. But I think it's the right pace and culture as a team to get where we want to go long term.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. And maybe, Sean, just to go back to the 4PL model, and as someone who has been an operator and led commercial teams that, made the decision to partner, be a node within a 4PL network, there were a couple of reasons for that. One, after looking at the financials, you would say, okay, this is going to allow me to occupy and be busy within some open capacity that we have. We're going to be able to fill this 20, 30, 40,000 square feet of space with inventory, be able to charge for warehousing. We're going to get some pick and pack. But the reality is in the 4PL model as it stands today, there's not a lot of margin. So, we made half the margin we're used to making. We wouldn't make margin on outbound transportation. So we're kind of really condensed and making half of a single digit op income margin. The 3PL that's acting as the has a relationship with the client, they're double stacking a little bit there. So our philosophy and philosophies of companies we've worked with in the past were like, okay, this will kind of be like a short-term scenario. Let's use this model to bring some revenue, cover some fixed costs within a certain amount of space. But when we go down the road and we could sell a more profitable piece of business, then we'll exit the 4PL model. We'll bring in our new client where we could, obviously have more financial upside. And I think that's been the challenge within the 4PL model is it's stacking margin. It's margin on margin. And who loses is the client, right? Because they're paying more. And then a lot of what you just said doesn't happen because it's very disconnected. It's very hard to manage a 4PL operator, right? And drive excellence. You have SLAs and you have expectations, but results aren't typically, they're typically not as much as if it was a direct client of that 3PL. So would just love for you to maybe unpack what you're seeing in that market today. And again, some of those organizations that I've experienced with had, some of them have had a lot of headwinds and there's been a lot of changes or disruption or acquisitions that have taken place. But, in that 4PL business model, like what are you seeing today, or what do you see needs to change for it to be, again, because I love what you just said, we listen and pay attention to our clients, listen to our customers, and that will drive our innovation and the next thing that we're working on or improvements that we make. What has to happen in the 4PL model for that to make sense for all parties involved?
Yeah, you have a really good understanding of the space because it's really only grown over the last few years. Sure, 4PL has been around forever. Forever, quote unquote, since the last decade or two. I think, all I'm trying to say is that when we were starting and we called a few warehouses and said, hey, if we're able to bring inventory to your empty capacity as a business, will you let us do so? They were shocked and not used to hearing that because they're used to their friends who own trucks, not warehouses, dealing with freight brokers and getting people bringing them customers. But as a warehouse, they've kind of always been on their own. There's a lot of people that do only that match empty warehouse space with customers who have the pallet needs. And I think that key distinction I just said is pretty spot on. First, it works okay for B2B palletized inventory, low touch, not a lot of complexity where you're really looking for storage space. That model for the kind of on-demand Airbnb warehousers of the world, I think it's a model. I don't think it's the most scalable, game-changing business as its own product, but I think it's a product that needs to exist in the market and customers need. Doesn't mean it needs to be a massive company. And then the second premise is it's good for pallet storage. But I think the second premise is it really depends on the software that's running that facility. Because like anybody, all we did when we started back in 2015 was integrate typically over EDI to whatever 3PL WMS that they had in the building. And it gets challenging in terms of, well, you're not actually helping that 3PL with anything besides space utilization versus today where we give them our WMS and we can actually help them measure and quantify. But again, it really comes to, is it the right customer for the building? And do you have a better value proposition to the client? In this case, the 3PL being more technology that you can bring them to be more efficient, or better engineering that's going to help them unlock a new product service. Because a lot of these 3PLs have only been B2B or light pick and pack, a little bit of case pick and labeling, and haven't necessarily been high touch, high velocity e-commerce fulfillment centers. I would just double back down on 4PL as a standalone is really hard. It's really good for temporary on-demand use cases where the value is the flexibility, not necessarily the pricing or the best-in-class efficiency. And that's where you see a lot of these B2B pallet storage on-demand networks. But if you really want to be a best-in-class network, you don't have to own every building yourself, but you have to really ensure you have the right hybrid footprint. You have to ensure you have the right software to run a high-touch environment at a distributed scale. And then you have to make sure you have the right value proposition to those 3PL partners of helping them get into a new category like e-commerce, helping them expand to new markets. So it just comes back to having the right value prop, having the right technology, and being more end-to-end than just being a 4PL warehousing network as a standalone.
It makes sense, Sean. And I think, I think the core is a technology play, right? In making sure that everything is connected and everything is flowing in the right manner. I do want to kind of just talk about real quick, though, one of the things that we're still seeing today is all these new channels that keep coming up, right? And there's a lot of buzz, a lot of focus on TikTok, right? And the opportunity that lies within TikTok for obviously sellers, because there's a lot of eyeballs, there's a lot of transactions. I have 3 daughters, and trust me, I wish I could get them off of it sometimes. But there's a lot of excitement, and there'll be another platform, and then there'll be another platform. So it's just a continuation of new sales channels. So how does, whether it's 3PL, 4PL, 5PL model, how do you always adapt to what's coming next? And what's the strategy to make sure that as a new market, as a new sales channel evolves, that it could be one that there's a gateway to be able to serve?
Yeah, really good question. I think that for us, we go with if you position yourself and wait for the wave, you'll be well in advance ready to capture it. But if you're constantly swimming after the wave, you'll never quite get there and stand up, because we didn't say, let's get into all these new things when COVID started. We had been doing them from a long time, and we were able to capture some of the supply chain disruptions to scale even faster. But I think this is a really relevant question, because you see a lot of brands out there and 3PLs and logistics platforms. Everything's about TikTok now, and everybody's just chasing the TikTok wave. TikTok's going to be a really important selling channel, I believe. But I think it's more about being an omni-channel and multi-channel in general, to say, how do we make sure that instead of having all these fragmented WMSs that need to go integrate to every new channel for all these brands, and then build some custom order allocation logic about how to split between your 3PLs for each of those channels, how do we build the OMS platform at the core with really good integration capability and allocation capability, to where that platform has a long list of pre-built integrations to different selling channels a brand needs to be on. And then it has features that meet that selling capability, because the last thing you want to do is go sell out on TikTok or Amazon or somebody else, share in the margin, have to spend more dollars to then go meet the delivery promise and more, and then run out of stock for your own website and all your consumers who you directly own, you directly manage, you have the best economics on, can't get any inventory. Here's what we've seen with 5 other brands. If you're going to do retail distribution into them, here's what you have to have in mind. If it's going to be an e-commerce drop shipping, here's what you have to have in mind. Because so many brands will just throw on a new channel, not on their marketing division or brand division, not really think through what does that do to their logistics team and their operations, and what do they have to plan for. And all of a sudden they have upset customers, out of run stock, and overspend. And so I think that's really the broad set. And we do apply that to TikTok as well, and all the new channels that we see our customers embracing.
Yeah, I just saw Roblox as a new channel as well. You can buy in the virtual world now. But talking about that, right? Like, one of the things we discussed at the beginning of this was how commerce channels need to look at logistics as kind of the center of the universe, right? When making these decisions and shifting that perspective. I also think that logistics needs to go a little beyond and get into the commerce side of the universe. So you just mentioned bringing in multi-channel orders and being able to manage. But what about the multi-channel management, which is listing, pricing? Because logistics has a direct implication, right? For you to be able to make a good margin decision on that inventory, because now you keep them separated by saying, hey, I'm going to have a number that says 10% of my inventory will be allocated to TikTok, or X value or Y value or something of that nature. But why not have the channel management, which actually can make the decision of how inventory needs to shift its level? Again, maybe it's a product idea, maybe it's something you're building, but that's where it kind of evolves into that next step to say, what if we are a channel listing tool as well as part of the logistics framework when you're talking about a multi-channel management type of tool?
I completely agree.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Really appreciate you being here with us. Awesome conversation. Want to give you the opportunity to share with the audience maybe what social platforms they could go to follow you personally, and where they could go to learn more about Stored.
Absolutely. So I'm very active on LinkedIn and Twitter mostly. I think my username on both is Sean Henry ATL, Atlanta, where we're based. And then our website at stord.com. Feel free to reach out, Sean at stord.com. We'd love to connect anyone with our team if they're interested in partnerships, roles, if you want to talk about the value we provide to our customers. But ultimately, a great way to find us is through the FIQ team, who knows us very well as well.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, don't you still have a podcast from Stored? And you can see this on the podcast, how to unfuck your supply chain, right?
I think we've since rebranded, but you're spot on. We do have a podcast that we'd be happy to link as well. We're about to kick it back off for the 2024 year.
Oh, I loved that name, by the way. So you guys aren't claiming that, so can I take it?
That was kind of our splash, get a lot of attention. I think we pivoted everything to rethink, just trying to balance all objectives.
Oh, beautiful. Really good talking to you, brother.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
I really appreciate this. You guys are experts. It's always fun to riff on this stuff together and think it through. And if you can't tell, we're very, very passionate about the space we live in.
Hi, I'm Ninad Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Fulfillment IQ, and I'm here with
Dan Call, CRO and partner at Fulfillment IQ. We're the team behind the eCom Logistics podcast. Our mission is to provide you with genuine insights from our work alongside logistics leaders to help you improve your supply chain.
In the eCom Logistics podcast, we share the knowledge and the insights we've gained from working alongside amazing brands, retailers, 3PLs, and VCs, so you can make the most out of your supply chain journey.
If you like what you're hearing, we'd truly appreciate your support with a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting channel. Your feedback not only keeps us going, but also helps others find the podcast. If you think Fulfillment IQ can assist you, or if you have an idea related to logistics, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always up for a chat and ready to explore new possibilities together.
Stay tuned to the eCom Logistics podcast on your favorite podcast platform for fresh and practical insights into e-commerce and logistics. Until next time, let's keep making a difference in logistics together.